Hello again, Steve here, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about religion and politics, and hopefully how this relates to our inner genie strength. Okay, because I've heard it said many times. In fact, very recently I was in a conversation with a couple of guys at work, and one of the guys who joined the conversation a bit late, the topic of religion and politics had come up or whatever, and he says, "Oh, those are kind of things we don't want to talk about." And I remember way back in the day when I used to listen to the Savage Nation with Michael Savage. He mentioned in there that I think it was his mother or somebody had said once, Michael, you should never talk about religion and politics in polite society. And his response was, Mom, that's all I like to talk about, basically. What am I supposed to talk about? And I think there are good reasons why people don't want to talk about religion and politics. And I'm going to cover a couple of reasons and hopefully sum it up with why I think this is important for our inner genie actions and us becoming more completely ourselves. I find that religion and politics often involves a little bit deeper conversation. So the first reason I think people don't want to talk about it is a lot of people are they appear to us to be a little bit shallow, maybe, but they just have other interests. They're not curious. They're not curious about that kind of thing. And you'll hear comments like, "Oh yeah, what are you doing, trying to change the world," or something like that. It's kind of a dismissive comment. A lot of times it's not deliberately. They're deliberately trying to get us on something. They're just not interested, I would say. And all of these reasons that I'm going to mention, by the way, I'm going to preface by saying they're a way of helping us to discern who it is that we want to talk to, basically, who we want to spend our time with in conversation. So that'll be the first one. And these kind of people, I generally find, they tend to be like decent women, essentially. Like they don't have any chagrin against us for wanting to talk about it. They're just honestly not interested. It's like you go to a dinner party, right? And at the end of the dinner party, guys end up by sitting over there, in more traditional societies anyways, the women kind of sit over there and they're talking about kind of quote unquote women's stuff. I mean, they're talking about the kids and all wonderful stuff, a lot of it, knitting or whatever. But they're not generally talking about religion and politics. They're not so much. So that's the first category, I would say. The second reason I would say that people don't want to talk about politics is that they're somewhat religious or political. And any sort of sway outside of their bias is kind of a threat to their worldview. And these people, you see them as social justice warriors and what have you, and they sometimes have different colors in their hair and whatever. And for these people, I find what works effectively is what I call the Trump trigger test, and I actually, they're usually suffering from what we commonly refer to as Trump derangement syndrome these days. And I did a video quite a while back, and there's a link in the description, hopefully, of that video, where it's something I discovered. I could just drop the word Trump into a conversation, and the reaction I get from the other individual tells me extremely quickly whether this conversation can really be constructive, right? So that's the second type of category, I guess. And the third type, I would say, is more dangerous for society and so on, which is that it's more of the high priests of society, who I would call the high priests of society, who are heavily invested to the point where they are basically professional grifters and hunter-gatherers, essentially. They don't produce anything other than feasting off the efforts and the labors of others. And these tend to be, the politicians, yes, the civil servants, the senior civil servants, the police forces, the university people, higher education people, intellectuals, and of course the media, because the media is bought and paid for by all these classes. So when there is conversation, political and religious conversation, which comports to their worldview, they're supportive of that. But the minute it deviates from that and exposes, facts, then it can be dangerous. Which actually I should have started this video with a bit of that, which is that I knew this person once who talked about how never be afraid of facts, because when this conversation had to do with free speech, her point was never be afraid of facts, because facts stand apart from yourself. They're not an opinion or some sort of an assertion. They stand solid of their own. But my point was that, but facts can be very dangerous for the one who presents them, because all you got to do is look at a guy like, Snowden or Assange, who were presenting, maybe they weren't totally facts, but they weren't coming from them. They're saying, this is what these people said, and here's the evidence of it. And they didn't necessarily steal the information. They got it from whistleblowers or whatever else. But Assange, he's locked up probably for life. Snowden, he's exiled in a foreign country. That's the only place on the world that he can be and be safe from the deep state, basically, right? And this has to do with them presenting facts which were a threat to the ruling classes, the priestly classes that I mentioned. And a good example of this, of course, right now is Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden, he was apparently a champion of, believe every woman no matter what she says and all this sort of thing. But as soon as the reports, credible reports, which can be verified if he was open to allowing them to be verified by looking into his Senate records and stuff like that, or some of it could be, facts could be presented. But those facts are extremely dangerous to him and his followers, because he, if the facts were presented, would lose his livelihood, the only livelihood he ever knew. I mean, he doesn't produce anything, right? He just gets a paychecks from the public purse. He doesn't produce anything. People have to produce that public purse from which he feeds from. And of course, there's a whole cadre of people around him and all his supporters, and their whole worldview could come crumbling down if this was exposed. So in this case, facts are very dangerous to somebody like Joe Biden. And that's a person of power. He will do everything he can to prevent those facts from being released. Think about it. Why is it that you think he and his supporters do not want an inquiry into his Senate records to verify some of the things that Tara Reade is saying? Is it because they know that nothing will be found? I don't think so. I think it's because they know stuff will be found, and it will be damning against Joe Biden. So yeah, it's incredibly important to recognize these things, and and this comes down to, it always ends up, because usually most of the bigotry that exists in the world, it exists in terms of religion and politics, because that's, I think, where a lot of the power circles sort of basically glom onto, both the power individuals themselves and those who cling to the power, right? Of one side versus the other. And therefore, the talk of political and religious topics is not only bothersome, but can be outright threatening to many people who are invested in those topics. I mean, think of Islam, for example. There's a religion which a lot of people say you should not talk about. If somebody makes a comment about Mohammed, you can get dogpiled and ratioed and censored off the internet and stuff like that. And people say it's just a religion. Well, no, it's not just a religion. Those things are a great threat to somebody's power structure, right? And the reason I think this is important for our Inner Genie project is because with these methods of quickly ascertaining who it is that we can talk to, we can then get to the point of being able to determine quite quickly and systematically and easily who we can spend time with as friends and who we can do business with. Because, you know, there's a lot of energy goes into what we do in the world. And if we waste our energy in people who are invested in something completely contrary to what we're wanting to do, wanting to achieve, wanting to enjoy, then it's a big waste of energy. And we're better off focusing, because there's many people in the world. There's thousands and millions and millions of people that we could possibly interact with. So why not interact with those who are supportive of what it is that we want to talk about and what it is that we want to do, what it is that we want to achieve in life? I think our effectiveness in the world will be enhanced, and certainly our quality of life will be enhanced. I was talking to somebody recently, and his point was that relationships are everything. Now, I don't know if they're everything, but they're certainly a significant part of our lives. So the better our relationships are, the more effective and the better our quality of life is going to be. And therefore, the more effective we're going to be at the end of it, right? Because this is what the Inner Genie Project is mostly about, is becoming more effective in our actions. And I think we can use things like knowing who's curious, knowing how to use the Trump trigger test, and understanding why it is that people will fight so vehemently against facts when they are a threat. Just like, if we cage a weasel into a corner, it will fight back with all its life because it feels that its life is at threat. You think about a guy like Joe Biden right now. If the truth of this comes out, the facts come out, he's toast. Even his own supporters will be forced to throw him under the bus. And that is extremely dangerous for him. Facts are dangerous to him. We'll have to remember that. And this is helpful for us to become more honest in ourselves and become more discerning in who it is that we hang out with. Talk again soon. Bye for now.